when you start doing your Four Seasons project, remember, you're going to want to be concentrating on using the warm colors and the cool colors. So the two different sides of the color wheel. And just remember that your three primaries, your blue, your yellow, and your red, secondaries and tertiaries can be mixed from those primaries. So we're just, as an example for thinking about the cool colors, I'm just going to start off with blue. So remember, blue straight out of the tube is going to be the pure hue. Okay, so I'm just going to, right off the bat, now I'm just going to lay down different variables of each color, each hue, as I start mixing them. So right off the bat, I'm just going to lay down just pure blue. Okay, and there's going to be some kind of inconsistencies in terms of this is an ultramarine blue, so there's going to be some kind of transparency coming through, which is the pure blue hue. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to now tint it. So I'm going to add a little bit of white. Okay. So now the blue that was on my brush, I put out some white, and now I'm just going to do some variables of that lighter blue. Okay, and now I'm going to add even more white. So I'm doing basically essentially different tints of that blue. Okay, and just like I had said in previous videos, like really try to mix the paint really well together. You can see how it's kind of blotching up on the part of the bristles. So again, I'm just laying down just so you can see the variables of a lighter, and then I'm just going to try to go even more light. So I'm just adding more white to the blue. So I'm basically, these are just kind of my initial tints that I'm using, which is straight blue. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to shade it. So now take some of this excess paint off in my water, in my cup of water, and now I am going to pick up some blue and I'm going to start mixing it with some black, like so. So again, I'm going to get variables of a darker blue that will be slowly turning in to not quite the darkest blue. I'm just trying to lay these out just to get variables of that darker blue. So now I have a couple shades of the blue. So I have the pure blue, tinted blue, shades of the blue, and now I'm going to mix and try to get some tones with the blue. So what I've done is I've cleaned up, I got another little paper plate that I was using for a palette. If you're using your wax paper or another plate that you're washing off, make sure it's totally washed off. Also clean out your, change your water for your glass of water. So now I'm putting out more blue. Now what I want to do is I want to mix the blue with a tone, and in order to do that, I need to mix it basically with a gray. So I'm going to mix a gray from the black and the white. Okay, so right off the bat, this is going to be a darker gray. So I'm just going to bring some more over here because I'm going to end up lightening this gray so I get different tones. And then I'm going to pick up a little bit of the blue, and then I'm going to mix it with this gray. Okay, so again, it's going to be kind of a darker tone for the blue, and I'm going to just lay some down in different areas. In some ways it's going to look a little close to that one when I was mixing it with the shade. It's close in value to that, So now I'm going to use less of it. And try to get more, mix it with more of the pure hue of the blue, lay it down in some spots. Just so I can get some more variables. And now I'm going to try to make the gray lighter. So now I have a lighter gray. And so essentially with each hue, with each color on the cool, well, you're going to be doing both the warm and the cool sides of the color wheel. You're going to want to mix them with a tint, mixing the color, the hue with white. You're going to want to create a tone, which you're going to mix with a gray, and then you're going to want to mix it with a black, so you get a shade. So now I am adding the blue to this gray, and you can see that it's not as pronounced as the darker side with the darker gray. Now I'm going to add some of that to different parts of where I'm laying down different colors. And then I'm going to try to add an even lighter gray. So the best thing to do with this is just to really experiment with getting different variables in terms of tints, tones, and shades of each hue. And then it's also going to, what's going to also be determined in terms of the value structure is how much of the pure hue you add to the tint or the tone of the shade, meaning the degree of actual paint. Okay, so now I'm going back. I've got this lighter gray, and now I've got this lighter tone, the gray mixed with the blue. And there can be kind of infinite amount of variables in terms of the value regarding the tint, the tone, or the shade. So now I'm adding this into different parts of this. So basically what I've done is just with my blue, I've tinted it, made it lighter. I've used the pure hue straight out of the tube. I've mixed it with black, so I got a shade of it, and I've also mixed it with a gray. So basically I have a tone of it too. So I have a lot of different variables just coming from that one pure hue of the blue. So again, I've gotten a new little paper plate that I'm using as a palette that's clean. And again, if you're using wax paper or you're using another, if you've cleaned off the palette, you're just going to want to clean it in between these steps when you're mixing color. And then I've also changed my water. And so now what I want to do is I'm going to move on to the next secondary color on the cool side, and that is green. And so I am going to mix the tube that's a little bit more accessible. In order to get green, I'm going to mix yellow and blue. So I barely have any water. Okay, just be really, if you use too much water, everything's going to look very transparent. It's going to look more like watercolor, and you're going to want to end up looking like more flat. Okay, so now I'm going to mix these two together, and I am going to get a green. Now again, the degree and percentages of the paint of either the blue or the yellow is going to determine the value of the green. Okay, meaning like how light or dark it is. Okay, so this is going to be, and try to, again, you really want to mix this well. You don't want to have streaks of blue or yellow coming out when you lay down and apply the paint to your painting. You want to try to get it as kind of flat and as opaque as you can possibly get it. Okay, so now I'm going to lay down the green. I'm going to kind of change directions just for the purposes of the interaction of the color. And this is going to be basically my pure hue for green. So now what I want to do now, just like what I did with the blue, is now I'm going to want to tint it. So I'm now going to add some white. So now I'm going to get a lighter green, and I'm going to do this, again, you're going to do this with every color on either side of the color wheel for your warm and your cool colors. And you're going to want to mix each one of them. You're going to want to tint each one of them with the white. You're going to want to tone each one of them with a gray, and you're going to want to shade each one of them with a black. Okay, so now I'm laying down my green in different spots. And you want as many variables as you can get, just so you know you're really showing the range of the cool colors. Okay, so now I'm going to add even more white and tint it even more. And I'm just laying them down randomly in different spots, just to create more kind of fluctuation with your eye moving around in terms of the value range and the cool colors themselves. Okay, and now obviously there's a little bit of the pure green on the side here. I'm going to now mix that with a black so I can get, and I probably put too much water down there, but I'm going to try to get a darker green. So I would suggest, unlike what I'm doing, using, like, if you're going to use like a paper plate or a bigger plate that you can wash off, that you use one that's a little bit bigger than the one I'm using. As you can see, it's running out of room. But this is just more about like how you're going to want to mix the paints. So now I'm laying down this darker green. So again, after I'm done with this, and I've done like a couple different shades of the darker green, and I've gotten a couple different tints of lighter green, and I have the pure green, I'm going to mix it with gray, and then I'm going to get a bunch of, try to get at least 2 or 3 different tones of the green after you mix it with the gray. We're going to now mix the secondary on the cool side of the color wheel. So we started off with blue. We did tints, tones, and shades of the blue from the pure hue right out of the tube. We mixed those to get the tints, the tones, and the shades. And then we mixed the primary blue and the primary yellow, and it was a 1-to-1 ratio basically in terms of the percentages of how much pigment I used to get green. Now, just remember, when you're mixing, if you use different ratios, you're going to get different hues. So if I would have used more yellow when I mixed the yellow and the blue to get green, it might have ended up being like a lighter green. So just be aware of that. So when you're trying to get the secondary on your cool side of the color wheel, which is violet, you're going to want to use a 2-to-1 ratio. So you want two times more blue than red. And so another thing, again, you're going to have to just experiment with this when you're mixing. Like, that might have been obviously too much red, but I'll just pick up less of it when I start mixing it. So, and also the last painting that I was using, as a demonstration, I knocked my water thing all over it, and it started looking like a abstract expressionist painting, like a Joan Mitchell painting. And so I'm starting from the beginning. So you can't see me develop the layers on top like what I was doing before. I apologize for that. Anyhow, so I'm going to pick up a little bit of this red, and I'm going to start mixing it with the blue. And I'm going to start seeing what kind of violet I get out of that. And again, it's going to depend on what red or what blue you have at home, in terms of how purple or violet the hue actually ends up becoming. So if I lay that down, it's like kind of a darker purple. So watch, if I add like a little bit more red, it's going to start changing a little bit. And then what we're going to do, so when you get it to a point that you feel like you understand for yourself, like what you identify as being violet or purple, then, you know, get it at that point when you mix it, and then you can start working with it from that point, in terms of, like, you know, adding tints and tones and shades to it. So I'm going to add some white and start seeing what happens with it when I add some white. And the main thing about this project, so this is actually starting to look like a grayish, well, it's looking more like a tone of the purple. So again, if I add more blue, and just go back and forth and kind of experiment with what starts happening with being additive and subtractive with when you're tinting it, or you're toning it with a gray, or shading it with a black. Start seeing, you know, what happens in terms of what you want from the temperature, what it starts doing with the temperature, in terms of your mixing everything together. So now I'm just going to go full on just to show you what happens when I just go over the top and just start mixing all of this together, and just try to see what value I get out of it and what it starts looking like more than anything else. It's going to start looking more like a tone, when I mix that white in with it, and it's going to be like kind of a mid-value, kind of tony, toned down violet. So essentially you're going to want to do this again with all the colors. So there's going to be basically 3 more remaining colors on the cool side of the color wheel. Remember, you're going to be mixing warm and cool, and just approach when you're mixing the warm colors the exact same way that I've been demonstrating this. You're going to mix your yellow and green to get your first tertiary on the cool side, yellow-green, and then you're going to mix your green and your blue to get your second tertiary on the cool side, your blue-green, and you're going to mix your violet and blue to get your blue-violet, on the cool side. So so look what happens when I just add a lot more blue and some red, and I'm going to add even more blue. And you can get variations. So again, also when you get your tertiaries, you're going to want to try to mix them and tint them with white, and then tone them down with grays, different grays, and then shade them with black. And like I said, the main point of this is trying to get as much of a range and a fluctuation in the range with your colors as possible, and just start seeing what develops. And once you've come up with your kind of conceptual framework for how you're gonna want to resolve depicting the 4 seasons, just be really aware and just cognizant about why you're using. I'm just going to throw out more red here and more blue. Just be really, really aware of your choices that you're making, because that's really going to inform how your paintings end up, you know, feeling in terms of tone and value, and then just overall temperature, but more than anything else, tone. Okay, so you can see. So the first thing I started off with, that one violet, was kind of like a stronger, kind of lower value of the violet. So again, just know that the ratio of violet is going to be 2 to 1 in terms of blue to red, and then that's also going to kind of be the same case for different colors as you're moving around the color wheel. But like, as I said, more than anything, I just really want you to experiment with mixing and trying to create these colors as you move, cyclically around the color wheel.